At around 2 a.m. on March 27, 2011, a train operator noticed something on the tracks near the Blanchard River and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge. Initially, he thought it was a deer. However, upon closer inspection, he realized it was the lifeless body of a young woman. The train operator immediately called the police. Upon their arrival, an officer identified the body as Vera Jo Riegla, who lived just a few blocks away on Center Street. Vera Jo was born on July 11, 1986, to Verna Messersmith and Willard Riegel in Findlay. She had intellectual disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Before her body was found on the tracks, Vera Jo had endured a life filled with suffering. She was just 11 years old when her father began abusing her. He was convicted of abuse and sentenced to 20 years at Lima's Allen Correctional Institution. Despite having the cognitive abilities of an 8-year-old, Vera Jo attended specialized classes and achieved a significant milestone in 2005 by earning her high school diploma. Those who knew her described her as gentle and reserved, enjoying singing along to country music and participating in Special Olympics events. The discovery of Vera Jo's body initially led to speculation that she had been hit by a train. However, her autopsy revealed otherwise. Dr. Mark Fox determined she had suffered blunt force and sharp force trauma to her torso, head, and legs, and that the attack had occurred at the train tracks where her body was found. News of Vera Jo's murder quickly spread, causing a public outcry. Authorities soon arrested 21-year-old Daniel Bixler from Tiffin and his 17-year-old girlfriend, Nicole Peters from Fostoria, in connection with her death. Just 3 weeks before Vera's murder, Bixler had been released from prison. His incarceration began in July 2008 after convictions for burglary, theft, and receiving stolen property in Seneca County. Bixler's past was filled with violence and drug abuse, with a history of assault and domestic violence dating back to his youth, including a disturbing incident where he assaulted a 7-year-old with a baseball bat. Bixler and Peters were charged with aggravated murder. Detectives learned that Vera Jo had been living with the Brooks family for the past 5 years and had a 17-month-old daughter with Zach Brooks named Willadian. Zach's mother, Sherry Brooks, claimed to view Vera Jo as her own daughter, stating, "She'd do anything you asked her to do." Also living in the home were Zach's brother Michael and his wife Shannon. About a week before Vera Jo was found dead, Bixler and Peters had moved in. Bixler's lifestyle included daily consumption of alcohol, ecstasy, cocaine, and marijuana. Detectives uncovered a strange dynamic within the Brooks home. Bixler's father, Daniel Bixler Sr., was Sherry's cousin, yet they had a child together named Scotty. The Brooks home had a long history of abuse, with Sherry's first 5 children, including Scotty, taken away by Child Protective Services due to abuse allegations. Bixler Sr. was incarcerated after stabbing his wife's lover. Detectives began piecing together Vera Jo's last known movements by interviewing the Brooks family and Vera Jo's relatives. According to her sister Ashley, she had seen Vera Jo the day before her body was found. Vera Jo was sitting outside the Brooks home, and Ashley recalled saying, "I love you," to which Vera Jo uncharacteristically responded, "I love you too." Zach and Sherry claimed Vera Jo had left the home on the night of her murder with a new boyfriend, but could only describe him as black. Further investigation, however, revealed a disturbing truth. Due to Vera Jo's intellectual disabilities, forming relationships was difficult for her. At 19, she began a relationship with 13-year-old Zach Brooks, unaware that what she was doing was wrong. When Vera Jo's mother and stepfather moved away, Sherry offered Vera Jo a place to stay. 4 years later, Vera Jo and Zach had a baby girl, Willa Dean. Sherry had a history of not allowing her children to leave home. After many were taken away, she forbade the others from leaving, even into adulthood. Some Brooks family members compared themselves to the Manson family. In the 2 years leading up to Vera Jo's murder, police had been called to the Brooks home at least 10 times due to complaints of harassment, threats, child abuse, neglect, fighting, and poor living conditions. On January 21st, Vera Jo's sister Ashley called police to report that Vera Jo was being held at the home against her will and wasn't allowed to be involved with her baby. Ashley believed Sherry allowed Vera Jo to live with them only because she was receiving Social Security disability checks.
Officer Marcia Hill responded to the report and found that Cherry was Vera Jo's guardian and the payee of her disability checks. Vera Jo was routinely beaten by the Brooks family, especially by Zach and Cherry.
Officer Hill noted Vera Jo's bruised and cut face and broken nose but did not investigate further when Vera Jo claimed her injuries were caused by an ex-boyfriend from Lima. Vera Jo had been so broken by the abuse that she accepted what she was told to do and say. Officer Hill reported that the home was filthy, with a bathtub filled with black mold and a mattress on top of rotting food. There was even a pig living inside the home, confined to a closet by a piece of plywood. 3 days later, police returned with a children's service worker, Officer Sean Nungester, who reported seeing cockroaches in the home. The report read, in part, "When we opened the door, a very foul smell was coming from inside the house. The house was very dirty, and it did not appear that the Brooks family owns a vacuum for the carpets." Vera Jo was also withheld food by the family. As the news of previous calls to the police became public, the community questioned why more hadn't been done to protect Vera Jo. Despite the numerous investigations, the state did not provide her with protection. In the wake of Vera Jo's murder, her biological mother, Verna, returned to Findlay to arrange her funeral. She spoke out about the Brooks family, stating that they were talking back to her, saying, "I didn't love her and I didn't want her." Verna claimed that Daniel and Nicole had abused Vera Jo in the hours before her death, and that the entire Brooks family knew about it. Just days later, Willadian was removed from the Brooks home and placed into foster care while Verna and her husband sought custody. On April 5th, Daniel was formally charged with aggravated murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. Nicole was also charged with aggravated murder.
Investigations revealed that on the night of the murder, Vera Jo had been tortured and beaten by Daniel and Nicole in the Brooks home. Numerous witnesses reported the brutal assault, with some stating that Daniel and Nicole tortured and stomped on Vera Jo. Scotty Emmons, son of Sherry and Daniel Sr., reported that after the assault, Daniel and Nicole took Vera Jo to the train tracks.
Terrified, Vera Jo asked Scotty to come with them, but Zach produced a knife and told him he wasn't going. Daniel and Nicole forced Vera Jo out of the home, stripped her naked in freezing temperatures at the train tracks, and began the attack. Nicole stabbed Vera Jo once, then handed the knife to Daniel, who continued the assault, stabbing her several times. Nicole then took the knife back and stabbed Vera Jo repeatedly. Vera Jo, trying to defend herself, cried out that she couldn't breathe.
When Daniel and Nicole returned to the Brooks home that night, Daniel bragged, "I killed that woman and she's dead on the tracks."
Following the arrests, Daniel led police to the murder weapon, a butcher knife they had disposed of in the Blanchard River. The motivation behind the murder varied, with some saying Vera Jo had sprayed mace and caused a miscarriage within the family, others saying she angered Nicole by looking at Daniel in a way that was misinterpreted. Some rumors suggested Vera Jo had to die after accidentally dropping a brick on Sherry's foot.
Amid the media attention on Vera Jo's life and death, many questioned why other members of the Brooks family hadn't faced charges. Vera Jo, who struggled with mental disabilities, seemed to be little more than a source of monetary gain for Cherry and her relatives.
In mid-May, news broke that 4 members of the Brooks family had been charged with obstruction in relation to Vera Jo's murder. Zach Brooks, who fathered Vera Jo's baby, faced 2 counts of obstructing justice. Cherry, Michael, and Shannon each faced 1 count of obstructing justice. The charges stemmed from allegations that the family provided false information to the police during the investigation and impeded the inquiry on the day Vera Jo's body was found. Zach also faced accusations of intimidating a juvenile witness who provided crucial information about Vera Jo's death. All 4 pleaded not guilty, and Cherry, Michael, and Shannon were released on personal recognizance bonds. Shortly thereafter, 14-year-old Chuck Brooks, the youngest son of Cherry, was charged with obstruction. In June, Daniel Bixler pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense attorney, Keith Sherlow, stated that an exam suggested limited comprehension due to mental retardation and a low IQ. Judge Reginald Rouston ordered Daniel to be evaluated to determine his competency to stand trial. 2 months later, Zach pleaded guilty to obstructing justice and agreed to testify against Daniel and Nicole. In court, he admitted to lying about Vera Jo leaving the house with a new boyfriend and threatening a minor who divulged details about her murder.
Michael, Shannon, and Sherry also pleaded guilty to obstructing justice, admitting they knew Vera Jo had left with Daniel and Nicole, but claimed she left with a new boyfriend.
In August, Daniel was deemed competent to stand trial, but then changed his plea to guilty for aggravated murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 40 years. Nicole also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. During her court appearance, she claimed the murder was planned with help from Zach, Cherie, Garth, and Shannon. She said the murder was planned after Shannon accused Vera Jo of causing her miscarriage. Nicole stated that every member of the Brooks family was present during Vera Jo's brutal beating before her murder, and that many participated. Daniel's attorney explained that the Brooks family had become frustrated with Vera Jo and that Daniel, having grown up with violence, acted on their urging. Nicole Peters was sentenced to 23 years in prison. During her sentencing, she apologized, stating, "Vera was a very sweet, kind, enthusiastic individual who lived life to the fullest. For her to be beaten the way she was is something no one should have to be put through. I know no amount of I'm sorry will justify or bring Vera back, but this is me making amends and taking responsibility for my actions." Vera Jo's mother, Verna, believed Nicole's apology was insincere. In light of the revelations about the Brooks family's involvement, Vera Jo's relatives wondered why they had not faced harsher consequences. "Why are they not in prison? Why are they not where Nikki and Danny are going?" questioned Vera Jo's cousin, April. Garth had not even been indicted in the murder investigation. The guilty pleas raised more questions than answers, primarily about the motivations behind the murder. Jealousy, revenge, anger, or twisted familial dynamics may have driven them, but these motivations remain unclear. Another pressing issue is how an intellectually disabled woman, known to social services, ended up so vulnerable to harm from those entrusted with her care. The warning signs were there, but they were ignored. Speculations arose that Sherry fixated on Vera Jo and Zach's daughter, Willa Dean, and that when Zach lost interest in Vera Jo, the Brooks family saw no further use for her. Willa Dean was placed in Children's Protective Services and put up for adoption. Zach's attempt to gain custody from behind bars was unanimously rejected. In 2013, a gravestone was installed to honor Vera Jo's burial site, thanks to Steve Johns, co-owner of Findlay Monument Company, who was moved by the documentary Goodnight Sugar Babe, The Killing of Vera Jo Rigel. The black gravestone bears Vera Jo's photograph and is adorned with purple ribbons. Today, Daniel and Nicole remain incarcerated, while other individuals involved in Vera Jo's murder walk free.